Welcome in to Husker Max today. I'm Kaleb Henry. That is Nick Handley. A suspension is coming for the Nebraska football game this fall against Michigan. We'll get into that, as well as the newest Husker football commit, which happened after our last show. A little bit of a tossing of the cap and infuriating of some Illini fans. Trae Taylor and his commitment and some peer recruiting that he's got going on. We're going to preview the Big Ten softball tournament with voice of the Huskers for Nebraska softball, Nate Rohr, coming up in just a little bit. But we're going to start with another phenomenal weekend for Nebraska baseball, where things feel terrible on Friday, and then just a whole bunch of getting work done late in the game Saturday and Sunday. And I had a little bit busier of a weekend, so there was more time in the car as I was just kind of out and about, which meant a lot of time listening to Nick Handley and Ben McLaughlin. And you guys were phenomenal, of course, with the walk-off on Saturday, but also with Gabe Swanson getting home yesterday and taking the lead and just everything happening there. Always fun to listen to you guys. But now, Nick, this team is finding a way to make things difficult on themselves and then answer the bell. And it seems like every weekend they're doing that now.
And you'd almost at this point, Caleb, be freaked out if they won a Friday game. You know, I mean, at some point you're like,
I don't know what to do.
Okay, how the hell is this series going to go now? All of a sudden, they just won on Friday. Now, out of all the conference wins, they did beat Rutgers, but that's the only Friday night win they have in conference play. And coming in, Minnesota had 2 Friday conference wins. So neither team was really lighting it up on a Friday in conference series play. But I mean, I think you have to start with the response from this team. And I still go back to 2 weeks ago. I don't know how many. I know you get it. You played athletics. You played at a high level, but I don't know how many people understand what Nebraska was tasked to do 2 weeks ago when you lose in heartbreaking fashion that Friday night against Northwestern, where you work so hard, tied up. Overbeek hits the solo shot to tie the game up. You're thinking, okay, all the momentum at home is in that third base dugout. And then it was nothing more than just a good 2-strike little punch out to right field that scored 2 runs for Northwestern, and that proved to be the difference. And so not only do you lose that Friday game, but you lose in really just gut punch fashion. And then what you're asked to do that following Saturday is, okay, normal weekend, like, okay, just need to get one. All right, one at a time. We're focusing on Saturday. Well, you know, you're showing up to the ballpark. It's going to be a long day because you got 2 games. So you got to sweep a doubleheader. And I don't care who you're playing. I don't care how good you are and who you're going up against. Sweeping a doubleheader is a lot to ask. And Nebraska did that. So they showed that resilience there. And then you fast forward to last weekend in College Park, Maryland, where they're in a situation of they lose on Friday and really kind of got thumped that Friday night too. That wasn't a close call. That was just frustration in, I think, all facets. And then Saturday, you wake up, hey, we're going to push the game back a couple hours because there's lightning in the area. So you're kind of sitting around a little longer than you'd like to, especially for this team that's probably chomping at the bit to get back out there and try to atone to what happened on Friday. They roll with all of that. They win a real solid game, good performance. Ty Horn was really good. Offense was very opportunistic and clutch in moments. And then okay, what does Sunday hold? Well, you just put a barrage of runs on Maryland, and that game's over in the second inning. So there's that. And then this weekend, this Minnesota team they're scrappy. And the way that Ty McDevitt used their bullpen was head-scratching, but it also drove home the point that Minnesota knew they needed this series. And so they were firing all their bullets on consecutive days, Friday and Saturday, to try to get that win on Saturday. And if you worked a little bit last night, sorry, you're going to have to put in a little overtime today. And fortunately for Nebraska, it backfired a little bit, but there was that clear case of sense of urgency from a team that is a little worse off than Nebraska as far as getting into the Big Ten tournament. So they were throwing everything they possibly could at Nebraska, and Nebraska, they win it in dramatic fashion on Saturday. And then the way they closed out yesterday was, again, a tip of the cap to what this team is made of when it does come to resiliency. Then on the other hand, though, Caleb, you're fighting and playing with fire. Mm-hmm. And I just don't know that if that's the way to go. Now, you can look at it in single game situations this year. where Nebraska's been good in the midweek, much better than they were a year ago. So when you're thinking of a possible Big Ten tournament, okay, it's a one game as opposed to a 3-game series. But eventually, if you start getting into that conversation about regional and, dare I say, super regional, that Friday inability to really put it all together, that's tough. Now, I want to say this, other than the Rutgers win, Nebraska on the mound against Iowa that Friday against Kate Obermueller did everything they could in their midst to win that game. I mean, what Will Walsh gave you that Friday night, unfortunately, that offense was handcuffed by a really good pitcher. So it's not like they just played garbage baseball on Fridays, but that inability to get a win, you wonder how long can you go that way? And they got another tough one this weekend against Michigan.
My concern level would be greater if Nebraska was losing 17-2 every Friday. It's not good. The baseball's not good that you're not winning, except for that one against Rutgers. That's not helpful, but it's not 17-2 every Friday. Nebraska did fight back in the late innings this past Friday to force extras. Mm-hmm. So you had that fight there, and then it's just, all right, as I wrote in my story, that's where the luck ran out, because Nebraska had a few things go their way over the last couple innings to get it to extras. And then you get to Saturday, and you're starting to think, is it going to be heartbreak again right at the end? Or is there some magic because you had a walk-off earlier in the week? Are you going to get another walk-off here? Tell me Robbie's story. His first year as a Husker coming up from the JUCO ranks, and then getting to have that moment where you are the walk-off guy and you get to push the series level on a weekend.
I've said this about Robbie Bolin, and a lot of this comes from the coaches. We sit down, Ben, myself, and David sit down with both Will Bold and Rob Childers before the season. We did this. It would be Greg and myself and Ben in previous years as well. They're always great of giving us their time, and they're candid when they tell us about this team. They want to give us some of that insight, but they also want to help our broadcasts on knowing these guys, because that's a big part of promoting the program as well. Robbie Bolin, they had a problem with, and this is a good problem, not a bad problem. Their problem was they're trying to find a place for him in the outfield. They're trying to find a place for him in the lineup because they loved what they had from him in the fall, from Barton County in the JC ranks and playing in that Jayhawk League. He's a Topeka kid, so he knows Midwest baseball as well. And they loved his athleticism. Will's told me on a couple occasions, I know a lot of people say, hey, Riley Silva is without question the fastest player on the team. Will's told me on a couple occasions, it might be Robbie Bolin. Robbie Bolin is step for step with Riley Silva, and yet they're built different. Robbie Bolin is completely jacked. I mean, he is a large dude. And I think when people saw the walk-off and he's peeling the shirt off and, he's showing the excitement, you probably saw some veins in the arms as well. He's a guy that he can help you, obviously, at the plate. And we saw this again this weekend. He tracked down some fly balls out there that were big catches as well. And he's made some really nice catches since he's been put into the lineup and been more of a regular starter in the outfield, whether it's in center or right field. He's got a plus arm. He's got obviously plus speed. He can drive the baseball. I've said this, though, about him. The one thing that I'm waiting to come in his little upswing right now would be being able to drive the ball out of the park. I think that's coming. I think he's going to have one before not too long. And so he does all of those things, and yet you had a pretty loaded outfield coming into the season. So they just needed to find spots to get him some reps and to see what he could do. And, he would come in here and there, but it wasn't anything consistent. And so now you have a situation where he's a guy that once he, kind of like what Max Butenbach did over a month ago, got in the lineup through a pinch hit after Max had started the season. And again, inconsistent, like we've seen a lot of hitters, but then he got that second chance and he was able to grab a starting position and really force Nebraska coaches' hands as far as keeping him in the lineup. I think Robbie Bolin's doing the exact same thing. So I think the first word that comes to mind when I think of Robbie Bolin is an athlete. He is just one of those athletes, one of those guys that was really coveted when, remember, they switched from the original bats to the BB Core bats. Yeah. And the emphasis was being able to recruit athletes because you needed guys, that could drive the gaps, but could run. Guys that could stretch singles into doubles, guys that could get themselves into scoring position, guys that could handle the bat and put down a bunt if need be, but have a chance to also beat it out as well. But also guys that could track down fly balls and guys that could throw guys out at home or try to tag up from second to third. Bolin can do all of that. So I think there's all of those things about Robbie Bolin that we're just starting to scratch the surface on how good I truly think he can be with this team.
And if I'm remembering the series of events correctly yesterday, Nebraska goes up 4-3. I'm driving to my slow pitch softball game, so I'm like, okay, what time do I need to get out of the car and I can still not tear my shoulder for this game and get warmed up, but I'm still listening.
Uh-oh, we might have lost Kaleb. I think we might have lost Kaleb. I think we're froze there. So we'll continue the conversation about baseball. Rejoin Kaleb here. The baseball result again last night, if you're looking, or yesterday, I should say, if you're looking at what to make of this team, and I think it's a fair question. I think a lot of people, myself, Ben, everybody that's followed this team are probably somewhat included. I think Will Bolt, to an extent, is included in this as far as what do you make of the last month of April? What do you make of the way this team, maybe not even what this team has shown, but what this team ultimately is? Because as you get into this month of May, this is when, much like college basketball teams, I always think in mid to late February, you want to be taking on the type of look that the team you're going to be when it comes to postseason, if that's conference tournament or if that's beyond. And I think for Nebraska, you have to start with that resiliency. I think you have to start with the ability to take a bad moment, whether it's within the game or take a bad night, like Nebraska has the past couple of Fridays, and be able to respond. Now, Nebraska, to their credit, it wasn't bad baseball on Friday. I mean, they tied that game up. They forced extras. Again, coming from behind, and you're thinking all the momentum is with Nebraska, and they're going to be able to pull that one out on Friday. Give Minnesota a lot of credit. That is a team that there's nothing about them that you look at from their lineup, from their staff, and even the way that they handle the baseball and say, wow, okay, this is what worries me. But that is, and I know it's going to sound really cliche, that is a hard-nosed team. That is a team that they try to push the envelope. I think it starts with their head coach, Ty McDevitt, with how he handled his bullpen. But also you get guys on base. I mean, they're dancing. They're doing everything they can to try to get a pitcher to flinch and possibly balk. All these little things. I mean, they're pushing the envelope. They're really trying to get you out of your comfort zone. And I think that's what we saw. This Minnesota team, they have some good wins. They have a series win against Arizona State. They beat Oregon State in one game as well. So, I mean, they've played some high-level baseball in the non-con as well. They're a team that does have a Big Ten series sweep. They were able to do so against Ohio State in the month of April. They had a 9-game winning streak. So even though their conference record isn't overly favorable to how you might view Minnesota, that's a hard-nosed team. So this was a high-stress weekend. And so the game that Nebraska had, to Caleb's point, on Friday, it wasn't this awful baseball game. It was a game where, unfortunately, for another week, Will Walsh was unable to go any real true distance in his start. Could be a problem. We'll see. A guy that I think Nebraska obviously has confidence in, but are you thinking it's not ideal, but are you thinking about possibly changing things up on the weekend rotation? We'll see. That's, again, a speculation and just a conversation if and when. But you also look at the Nebraska at times, and we've seen it this season, but this is college baseball. It's the baseball in general, of maybe having a cold inning here and there. And there was a countless amount of fly ball outs that Nebraska had. At one point, there were 8 in a row. So you're not getting solid contact early in the game. So the fact that Nebraska comes back and ties it up, you look at, okay, there's a team that was able to withstand all of those at-bats that they'd like to have back, but they're also able to put together some good at-bats enough to tie the game up. But then I also look at the part of Nebraska baseball that, and I'm sure Will Bolt would say the same thing, of those early opportunities in that game on Friday where you're not getting good contact, you're not getting good barrels, as Kaleb is rejoining us. So Kaleb, you were cut off right as you said you're trying to time it well for softball. Okay, so all right, pick up from there. I was just talking a little bit about the Friday game and what to make of this team right now, but please continue.
No, yeah, it was interesting to see that it's not exactly in that game. You have a big moment, and then there's a little bit of a letdown. But late in that game on Sunday, Nebraska takes a on, and Bolin tracks down a ball. And I could hear the excitement in your voice and in Ben's voice. And it was like, well, good for him. Good for him that he's coming out. And it's not just there's kind of just you're there for the next game. No, you're making plays that matter in the next game. So that I was impressed with that as I was listening to you guys with the call yesterday.
Yeah, and honestly, the other part about what Nebraska was able to do, they had Oregon help them out with beating Michigan State yesterday. Nebraska's now putting themselves solely in 11th out of the 12, so that is a good thing. There's a huge, huge weekend for Nebraska. I mean, every weekend from here on out is big. Don't get me wrong, but it's serving two purposes this weekend for Nebraska and Michigan. Nebraska's got, this is without question their biggest RPI week remaining. They've got Creighton tomorrow. That game is going to be so much emotion. The last game of Nebraska in Ed Service, 22 years, tip of the cap to the old skipper from Creighton. That is going to be highly emotional. Creighton feels like they're playing some pretty darn good baseball right now, too. That's an RPI opportunity. And then Michigan, the only remaining team, at least in regular season, that Nebraska has a chance to also gain some more RPI momentum. And so not only do you want to continue, you can ill afford to have a bad weekend considering where the conference standings are right now, but also knowing if you could grab a couple of wins, all of a sudden you do get some more RPI boost opportunities. I know it's premature to talk about that because you got to get into the tournament first and foremost, but you can't ignore it either that Nebraska does have a huge, huge week when it comes to both of those fronts.
A lot on the line still, too. I know Husker Chuck was asking about, is winning the Big Ten the only way to get into the NCAA tournament? I say no. I think there's still absolutely an at-large possibility for Nebraska, but you cannot have any let-up. It would help a lot to win against Creighton tomorrow night and then win the final two series of the regular season. Yeah. Sweep one if you can, absolutely, and I think that would go a long way. But a lot of work still to do. I think Nebraska can get in as an at-large. But number one is find your way to Omaha. So you get those two games up there and you got to do a little bit of work. Big Ten tournament for softball is coming up this week because softball running a little bit ahead of baseball and the way the schedule works. And the Huskers will be heading out to West Lafayette. Purdue is the host. And we bring on voice of Nebraska softball, Nate Rohr. Nate, so good to have you on. It was fun to listen to. A lot of runs going up, not just this weekend, but throughout the course of the season. And, of course, getting to hear a little bit more of a crowd yesterday from the old Bolin Stadium with a record for the weekend, and on Saturday a record for one game. That was fun to listen to you with the Huskers Radio Network and everything going on out at Bolin.
Yeah, it was really a fun weekend for Nebraska softball. You know, Maryland was a team that was mathematically eliminated from Big Ten tournament contention. So they weren't going to bring the excitement, the juice, the importance to the weekend. So it was going to have to come from the fans and from everything surrounding the game. And fortunately, Saturday and Sunday, that delivered. I mean, Saturday was a poetic day, really, when you consider a school record crowd, 3,021. When you consider between 80 and 100 alumni spanning the entire history of the program were in the building to take in the game and see the progress of the program. And I mentioned this on the air that, you know, some of those players, they were on those first teams that had to justify their existence. You know, they had to borrow used uniforms. They had to beg for locker room space. They had to beg for resources to exist as a program. And they could look back and say, okay, this thing that we started now is supported, now is of interest to the fan base, It plays in a beautiful ballpark that's full, that has been expanded. It had to be really special for him, and I think it was in talking to Rhonda Revelle, who wasn't quite in that generation of players, at least at the college level, but she was kind of in the next generation of players when softball was still trying to find its legs. So Saturday was very special. But you figure, okay, maybe it was a one-time deal, and though Sunday will have a big crowd, it won't quite feel the same. Not the case. The place was basically full, 2,600 fans, and Nebraska came out and performed and did what they were supposed to do. Ava Cusack and Jordy Ball both hit home runs. Ball pitched well for 4 innings. So really just a special weekend for Nebraska softball and a cap on what's been a very good season for this program, and to lock up the 3rd seed in the Big Ten tournament and a tied for 2nd finish in the conference. I want to point that out. The same conference record as UCLA. That's really special for this team and this program, and it feels really good going into the Big Ten tournament and under regionals.
I want to point out that Nate Rohr brought some of that offense from Bolin Stadium over to Haymarket Park, because once he came into our booth and visited us, all of a sudden Nebraska started turning it around offensively yesterday. But Nate, you kind of answered my question there at the very end of, I know the goal for every team, and there's a mental part of this as well. The goal for every team going into conference play is to feel very confident that you're playing your best softball, that there are no chinks in the armor, that, okay, maybe you're limping in a little bit and you got to get some things tightened up. I don't feel like that's the case with this Nebraska softball team. I feel like they are playing as good as they've played. It seems like there's a consistency. And you brought up Maryland's situation this weekend. When you have a team like that is going to throw everything at you, but also it's easy for the team that has everything to lose, like Nebraska in that situation, to play down a level. Just their overall business-like approach, I think, also bodes very well for the postseason. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the fact that they were able to maintain their focus, maintain sort of that loose, strength that you have to have. Baseball, you can't play baseball and softball. You can't play with your teeth clenched, but you also can't just lollipop your way through it. And we saw this weekend in the Big Ten, the 2 teams that were ahead of Nebraska have difficulty with teams that we thought they would go out and dominate. I mean, Oregon dropped a game to a Michigan State team that was in the exact same situation that Maryland was. They were mathematically eliminated from the Big Ten tournament. They've not had a very good year at all. And they go out to Oregon, who's been just rolling through Big Ten play, and they take a game. Mm-hmm. And then, lest you think it was a fluke, yesterday, Michigan State was right in that contest. So you feel like Oregon backed off a little bit last weekend. And then UCLA loses 2 of 3 to Northwestern. And a lot of credit to the Wildcats to go out there and not just win a game, but win 2 games where their season's kind of on the brink. I mean, Northwestern is on the wrong side of the bubble as I see it right now. They're trying to mount a late charge to get back into NCAA tournament consideration. But, when you're the favorite and you're playing a team that has far less pressure on them, it's pretty easy to let your guard down. And Nebraska did none of that this weekend. And in fact, Jordy Ball doesn't give up an earned run. That's good. She hits a couple of home runs. That's good too. The rest of the offense is producing. And even the fact that they were able to get Kylie McGee going again. Kylie had been steadily trending in the right direction and then took a step back against Washington, really struggled, didn't get an out, walked 4 hitters and hit another. And it was an ugly outing. But she comes out on Saturday in a big spot and shuts down Maryland for 4 innings. So this team is playing its best softball. I don't think there's any question about it. There's no worry about how much gas does Jordy Ball have in the tank. Yeah. She's fine. She's 100%, which quite frankly is a shock to me. And that's no disrespect to her conditioning level, her preparation level. I just thought the workload of being an ace pitcher would begin to catch up with her. And if not in how she pitched, then how she hit. She's hitting better than she's hit all year. So this team feels like it's finding its stride right now, no question.
Whether you are a 2 seed or a 3 seed, you're still on the same side of the bracket in the semifinals if seeds hold. So for Nebraska, you're still there, even though you tie for second, you get the 3 seed. What do you think of the draw for the Huskers with Penn State and Iowa? They'll get the winner of that game on Thursday. They'll play bright and early, 10 a.m. Central Time. And then from there, just
you've done the morning show life. Hell, that's lunchtime.
I know. Yeah, that's lunchtime, but I'm also not playing high-level softball in West Lafayette for the conference tournament, trying to win the second one in program history, first since 2022. What do you think of Nebraska's draw this week?
I think it's pretty favorable. I mean, Iowa has had such a strange season this year. They go out and they sweep Rutgers this weekend. Rutgers was mathematically eliminated from the Big Ten tournament too, so where are they? Iowa somehow has played themselves onto the bubble, or at least bubble consideration, despite the fact that they've had 3 different people serve as head coach this semester. Renee Gillespie came in as their head coach, stepped down 2 weeks before the season with health concerns. The interim coach takes over, coaches for about a month, steps down due to culture concerns in the program. They're on their 3rd coach, and Renee Gillespie, Iowa announced Gillespie will not be back next year. So where is their head right now? I don't know where they are. They could be galvanized, they could be locked in, or it could be a situation where they're carrying a lot of baggage with them when they hit the field. And Penn State's had a disappointing year. They had a great pitcher in Bridget Nemeth that returned this year but got hurt and has missed the whole season. So where are they? Are they feeling like, okay, we want to keep fighting? Or are they of the mindset that, look, this has been a battle. We're ready to take a knee and reset. And you put that 3 seed draw against the 2 seed draw for UCLA. And, Indiana is a team that's right on the bubble. And they'll be playing just down the road from their campus. So they'll have a lot of support and a lot of fans in attendance. And then Washington, they're another team that's, I think, in the NCAA tournament field, but they're in the thick of NCAA regional consideration. It's been a down year for them because they lost big in the transfer portal, but it feels like they've come together and they're starting to play better. So all in all, even though Nebraska has the lesser seed, I think they got the better draw, which, you don't, it's not the way it's supposed to work, but just how the teams are playing. And the fact that the middle part of this conference, I think, is pretty tightly packed. I would say the top 4, I would say the top 2 until last weekend were a shelf above Nebraska and Ohio State, and then it was those 2 teams, and then it was the middle of the pack. But Northwestern's kind of played its way up to that top shelf. Nebraska and Ohio State have maintained their level of play, and Oregon and UCLA stumbled down the stretch. I mean, especially UCLA. So you feel like it's a tight 5 at the top, and then you feel like 6 through 11, 12, that's a pretty tight bunch. So it'll be interesting to see how many upsets come up as a result.
I got to ask this, and we were rudely interrupted by baseball resuming, as I asked you during the commercial break yesterday. And I know you've been asked this question a lot. I know this has been brought up on Sports Nightly as well. Nebraska, any chance that exists that they could still host a regional?
Yes, it is small, but it exists. I would put it at a 5 to 10% chance. In these parameters, Nebraska will not be a top 16 seed. They updated the RPI this morning. Nebraska is 25th. There's not enough meat on the bone. Mm-hmm. Even if Nebraska wins the Big Ten tournament, which would presumably include wins over UCLA and Oregon, there's not enough there to get them in the top 16. However, there is a very unique situation because Stanford is number 15 in the RPI rankings. Stanford this season is renovating their softball stadium. I think they tore it all the way down and they're starting over. So they're playing their softball season at Stanford Stadium, the football stadium, in a corner. So they did not bid for regionals. Nebraska did. So Stanford's going to have to go somewhere. And they're 15 in the RPI. In theory, you could make them a high 2 somewhere, but maybe you send them somewhere and then you have the high 2 host, whomever that may be. That high 2, especially if the Huskers play well in the Big Ten tournament, might be Nebraska. Other factors. Omaha won the Summit League regular season championship. Creighton is a factor in the Big East. Northern Iowa is a factor in the Missouri Valley.
Mm-hmm.
So you might have 2 teams that could bust to Lincoln, and then you fly in Stanford as the one. That is the scenario. I still don't think it's the most likely one, but it's certainly a possible one. And that would put Stanford at about a 15 or a 16 national seed, which is where they are right now. Nebraska might be a little overseeded as the 2, but officially the NCAA tournament for softball, and I think this is the case for baseball as well, does not officially seed past the top 16. So the NCAA is looking for ways to minimize costs, to have regionals where teams bus. They generally want to bus at least 2 of the 3 teams in. And there's a scenario that exists where Nebraska might just be the right place to bus people in. And bottom line on all of this, Nebraska just hosted a weekend series where they drew just shy of 8,000 people. Yep. 8,000 people buying tickets generates a lot of money. The NCAA would look at that and say, hey, let's make some money. Let's play at a very nice stadium, save some money, not having to fly Omaha somewhere and not having to fly presumably a Northern Iowa, a Creighton, a Missouri State, which is a possible in the MoVal. It could happen. I'm spending a lot of wind on a 5 to 10% chance.
But you're leaving no stone unturned on this. This is why I love the response, because
there you go.
If there's a chance, I want to know how that chance comes to fruition. Right. And you're doing that.
It's a little tough for me to justify rooting for Creighton in anything. But if there were ever a scenario where it might be favorable for the Blue Jays to have success, this might be it. Okay. Where they win the Big East tournament and they are a short bus ride, and they're a possible, certainly, in the Big East. So you're rooting for those teams that could bust to Lincoln. Another team that I left out that has had a late surge is Iowa State out of the Big 12. They're not in regional contention right now, but they could maybe play their way in the Big 12 tournament, and certainly if they win it, they would go. And they're a team that could bust to Lincoln. The official rule is 400 miles. That gets stretched a little bit, especially on the margins. So, you could get a team busing up here. That's 420 miles away, say. But basically, you're rooting for teams close to win conference tournaments, then fly in Stanford as the 1, Nebraska as the 2. One other ancillary benefit from this. So the 16 seed would play the 1 seed in super regionals. Mm-hmm. Who is tracking to be the number 1 seed? Oklahoma.
Yep.
If Nebraska were to come through a home regional, you get Jordy Ball in Norman. The NCAA folks are licking their chops.
You're telling me the NCAA actually tries to do this to manipulate storylines too? No, Nate, they never do that. That never happens.
We're going to start talking chemtrails and seeding clouds. And, it was the CIA that took down JFK. But it's all conspiracy theories all the time here.
Boy, you crazy, I tell you.
Yeah.
Well, way before the NCAA does that, we'll have the conference tournament this week in West Lafayette. Nate Rohr, voice of Nebraska softball, as well as sports director over at KLIN, and a beautiful office that you have there in the dungeon of the NRG broadcast house. So, Nate, appreciate all of the info and looking forward to listening to everything you've got from West Lafayette this week, beginning Thursday morning, 10 a.m.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen, and hopefully at the beginning of a very fun May for Nebraska softball.
See you, Nate.
There we go. I remember, and I don't know if you were listening to it, what would have been 2 years ago, Nick, that run that Nebraska put on through the Big Ten tournament to win their first Big Ten tournament, but also the fact that, and this took like remembering as it was happening, is that softball plays single elimination. We're used to baseball with the double elimination format. Nebraska charging back last year through the consolation bracket and getting all the way back to the championship game where it's just the one game. It's no longer double elimination once you got there. And then the new format this year. But softball is it's single elimination. Even though the field is 12 teams, if you have one bad game, you have one bad inning, you're done.
Yeah, it's a fast tournament. It's a tournament that, again, this is where there's a part of me as a fan of the ball bat sports being fair, that for the teams that are going to be favored in a situation like that, you've got to sharpen your skill even that much more than anything, sharpen your focus, because especially for the Nebraskas, the Oregons, the UCLAs, the better teams in this conference, they're the ones that are going to be the hunted. And so, like Nate was bringing up, that's why I was impressed with what Nebraska did this weekend, because you have a Maryland team that has nothing to play for postseason, but they want to go out a winner. They're going to try to throw the entire kitchen sink, and they're playing with house money, nothing to lose, everything to gain, to go out on a high note. And Nebraska didn't lower that level of play. They said, hey, if you're going to do that, you got to match our intensity. You got to match our standard of play. And it's easy to let off the gas a little bit. It's easy to lose focus a little bit, knowing what you're up against. And I think the fact that you had Oregon suffer that type of consequence because they bring their level down a bit, those little things right there are the things that really do encourage me of thinking this Nebraska team, even beyond Big Ten play, could have a deep run, because I just feel like they're holding each other accountable. They're holding themselves to that standard that they have now achieved, that they finally have gotten to that point where they're playing solid softball. But for that format, if you have one little slip up, especially like Nebraska, who Nate said it's not a big chance, but there is a small chance that they could host, as long as they're in good standing, both in the regular season, which a top 3 finish would indicate such, and if they could possibly win the Big Ten tournament, that you could do so building up enough RPI and just look at that entire body of work and put yourself in a position of, this team is playing very, very well. And there's a lot of great things on top of that could benefit Nebraska of being a possible regional host. So there's so much that I like about what Nebraska has been able to show. And we'll see if a team is able to. I'm sure it'll happen at some point, especially as they get further into the Big Ten tournament, but how Nebraska handles some of those higher stressed moments, because it's going to happen. And that also is a good indication, because this team's going to the NCAA tournament. We know that they could lose that first game and they're still going to the NCAA tournament. They could lose by 20 and they're still going to the NCAA tournament. But I want to see how they're pushed against some of those good teams, how they respond, because those are the type of teams that they're going to be up against in the NCAA tournament.
We're going to transition. We're going to go football the rest of the show, and some news. While I was working on my connection here, I was able to see it pop up as a notification. Husker football has got a 2026 linebacker commit, Jace Reynolds, 6'2", 210 linebacker out of Elkhorn, picking the Huskers over Kansas State and Northwestern. He is the 4th commit in that 2026 class. Since our last show, we saw the 2027 class officially get on the board with a 4-star, probably going to be a 5-star quarterback when all of the re-rankings come back. But Trae Taylor out of Illinois, Chicago area, got a lot of folks in his home state upset the way he did his commitment ceremony. He pushed a couple hats to the side, put on the Illinois hat, said, I'm staying home in going to Illinois, waited a click, waited another click, waited a third click, and then chucked the hat to the side, put on the Nebraska hat, took the family all takes off the hoodies and the zip ups, and you've got all the Husker gear. And a nice Nebraska baseball jersey getting So, Nick, that was last Thursday. You didn't have a baseball game going on. You weren't on the road. Were you able to catch any of that? And your reaction of Nebraska now being, at least through commitments, set up for the next several years on the quarterback room?
Yeah, first of all, I thought, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. He's going to pick Illinois over Nebraska. It must have a good NIL deal that's going to be situated that they've already started to present to him, and the lure of the home state. And then within seconds, like, no, I'm just messing with you. I was appreciative of the baseball jersey. I don't know if they sent that to him or if there's just a Shields in the area there for Trae Taylor. But the thing that I really am excited about, what you mentioned, that quarterback room, and knowing that you also have you got another Riola coming in, and then Trae Taylor, but also what we're seeing and hearing already early from TJ Lateef, that is a very competitive quarterback room with some talent. And again, now having a guy like Dana Holgorsen that can mold those quarterbacks, and Glenn Thomas that can mold those quarterbacks and be able to really, I think, present a great opportunity for a lot of young talent for years to come. Now, we don't know what the end game is for Dana Holgorsen once Dylan is through the program. We'll see if there's that similar connection that he wants to, be around and see Dayton's development, TJ Lateef's development, and then eventually Trae Taylor. But I think as long as Dana Holgorsen is on staff, and a lot of great things about Glenn Thomas, I think that becomes a very attractive place. Now, Dylan's success, I think, ultimately is going to answer the question if you can keep that going when it comes to the quarterback recruits and being able to get, 4, possibly even 5-star type guys in the future. But I love that. And I love the fact that Trae Taylor wanted to get that commitment out of the way, because he wants to do much like, even though it was at the very end, Dylan Raiola did do it and is still doing it. And I think there's a big reason why you get Trae Taylor is being able to recruit to the team. So now that I'm committed, now that I'm in, who am I bringing with me? Who can I get to come with me? Who can I throw the football to? Who can I get to block for me as well? We know that was a big part of Dylan Raiola's commitment when he went from Ohio State to Georgia, then to Nebraska, that he was trying to also bring guys with him. So there's a lot of similarities. But as far as his game itself, I'm like you, Caleb. Sometimes I don't get on the film until that guy actually commits. But as soon as he does, I'll take a look at film, and I will keep in mind it's a highlight package for a reason. They're not always going to show the lowlights. They're going to show the highlights. But his size, his mobility, his ability to continue to scan downfield, he doesn't get hung up with a lot of the distractions around him when he's in the pocket. There's a lot of things that are only going to get better as he has more experience, but what he possesses right now as a young player, I think, is very attractive. You could see why he was a 4-star guy and why he was highly coveted. I think there's, again, another exciting player and possibility that we could see in Lincoln playing in some very big games for Nebraska in the future.
If you go to HuskerMax.com or Nebraska Cornhuskers on SI, you can actually see a little bit of a film review from our own Caleb Siss, and he's got a couple stories up right now. We've got a few more in the bank that we're going to roll out. The peer recruiting that Trae Taylor is already doing, and one of them you can read already that we posted yesterday. It's on a 5-star wideout who is committed to Ohio State. Well, they happen to be, guys in the same area. He's got really talented teammates there at his school in the Chicago area. So there's the potential for Nebraska to load up on some future classes. Right now, Taylor's the only guy in that 2027 class. Potentially, he can help that grow. Those are guys that are sophomores in high school right now. They are getting ready for their junior year of football this fall. So a lot of time between now and signing day. And obviously, the Nebraska football program could look very different come December of 2027. Yes, that is when he would sign. December 2027. Junior 5-6, December 2026.
Yep.
So you're a year and a half out from the signing day for that class. It is nice to see that he immediately, even if it's in small ways, it's just in social media posts, in small ways, already helping with the growth of that class, because And Nick, I want your thoughts on this as well, is that high school recruiting is different right now than it was even 2 years ago because of the transfer portal and because of wanting to go get guys there and because of the roster limits, which are not fully imposed yet, not even approved yet, and could be getting grandfathered in if the NCAA decides to rework some stuff that the judges asked them to rework. But the high school classes aren't 25 anymore and then a bunch of walk-ons. They might be closer to 10 to 15. And so when you get your quarterback in and you can go and get a bunch of quality guys to come in with that quarterback, that's a big deal to get some high school guys that you can have in the program for 2-3 years while adding those transfers that have experience coming from other programs.
And Kaleb, doesn't it put that much more pressure on the coaching staff when identifying talent to you almost, and this is the one thing that I'm really interested to see with Matt Rule is he and a lot of the original guys that came over with him in that first staff 2 years ago pride themselves on being able to find diamonds in the rough and having the developmental guys that come sophomore, junior year could impact the team. But we're going to use that freshman, even redshirt freshman year to really develop their skills. Time's not on your side now because now you've got to be able to look at the guys that can help you immediately. And there's two reasons for that. One, you got less room on the roster, right? But secondly, we now know with the transfer portal too, if you're being brought in, I think it's very amazing that this coaching staff was able to tell a guy like Riley Van Poppel, who played some significant snaps his freshman year, then what would have been his sophomore year, say, hey, we want you to redshirt this one because we want this to be a developmental year. And he bought into that. That is not, in my opinion, the norm. I think you've got to have a strong culture and a strong leader to be able to paint that picture of why you want to do that and then to have the player accept that role. I don't think you can get that all across the board when you're bringing guys in. So I think there's also that part of if the guy is seeing when he's brought in high-level high school guy, if he's more of a project player and he's not seeing the playing time freshman, sophomore year, he's gone. So you're not going to be able to see, even as you're developing him his freshman year, you may not see the fruits of that labor with your own team. You might see it against you somewhere in the Big Ten or in a different power conference school. So that's I think the sense of urgency, the emphasis of your evaluation, you have to find more college ready-made guys now. Guys that if they had to play as a freshman, not only could they do that without being completely overwhelmed, but they could make a play or two for you as well. So I think that changes a little bit of the outlook of how Matt Rule and this staff like to recruit the high school way. But what we're also seeing is they're more than capable of doing that. They've been able to do both. They've been able to find the project guy and then find the ready-made guy. Now you got to focus more on the ready-made guy. But when you get that quarterback situation figured out, when you get that big-name quarterback, we know, just as you pointed out, how easy it can be to have the help of that recruit be able to, I don't want to say do your job for you, but be able to really make your job a little easier when it comes to peer recruiting and being able to get more ready-made guys on both sides of the field.
Whether it's Trae Taylor or Jace Reynolds, who just committed this morning to the Big Red, then you're getting an in-state guy, so that's its own conversation that a lot of people have liked to have about Matt Rule and in-state recruiting with the 2026 class. That's still a ways off. Those guys aren't playing this fall. Nebraska has the potential of taking on an interim coach week 4 against Michigan. Yes, Sharon Moore is University of Michigan is looking at a self-imposed 2-game suspension for weeks 3 and 4 on their schedule. Now, what that'll do is that allows Moore to coach in the season opener as well as coach in their second game against Oklahoma, which is his alma mater. That could be a fun thing for them. But clearly they're picking and choosing where some things are to where you have Michigan without its head coach against Central Michigan, and that's where Connor Stallions was famously in the background on the sideline. So you already have that not happening. And then the first Big Ten game of the season for the Wolverines with Nebraska hosting in Lincoln. I think the NCAA is going to look at that and they're going to come in and say that's not enough games, or they're still going through their investigation. There's the potential that those first 2 games of the season get added, or there's a lot to still have itself play out over the next 4 months, 5 months before we even get to those games that right now Michigan is saying they will have suspended their head coach for. But clearly Michigan is seeing something in the investigation with the NCAA and saying we have to do something because the NCAA is going to come in here and there's going to be more brought down with the hammer on top of, for us locally, Nebraska getting to take on an interim head coach in week 4.
It's interesting to the standpoint of we're still having the lingering effects of this, but this is not a situation, you know it as well as I do, that this was, poor Sharon Moore. He was part of the Jim Harbaugh exodus that Jim Harbaugh was able to leave before anything further came out. Now, Jim Harbaugh had some self-imposed through the conference and through the school suspensions and penalties, but I think what we've learned from this cheating scandal is it's exactly that, and really the meticulous nature that it took place with Connor Stallions, and everybody was complicit in this, including Sharon Moore. And that was the thing about Michigan is if they were going to replace Jim Harbaugh, they knew by doing so you did bring over a guy that was still part of that, and that you made yourself vulnerable to these types of potential suspensions. I do find it very interesting that if you're looking at a 2-game chunk and you brought up who they play right out of the gate and having Oklahoma in that second game. Okay, New Mexico, not a big deal, but it's not like you can have a 1-game suspension against New Mexico. That's laughable is what that is. So you'd have to do a 2-game thing. It's not like you can go, all right, we're going to have New Mexico and Central Michigan. We're going to suspend for games 1 and 3. That's not going to fly. So you got to have consecutive games. So you're essentially, and you got to do it early in the season. So essentially you're looking at what is the more challenging stretch in a 2-game, New Mexico, Oklahoma, or Central Michigan, Nebraska? Well, we think Oklahoma is going to be more challenging than Nebraska. So let's go ahead and take the Central Michigan and Nebraska game, try to offer that one. I think you bring up a great point, though, Kaleb. If you're the NCAA and you're the ones who ultimately have to sign off on this thing and say, okay, yeah, that's acceptable to us, you're looking at that as, wait a minute, why should you be able to dictate the games that your coach is not on the sideline? You know what? We'll see your weeks 3 and 4, and we'll raise you weeks 1 and 2. So how about a 4-game suspension, 1 through 4? So you do still get your Central Michigan and Nebraska game, but we'd like you to sit out for New Mexico and Oklahoma as well. After that, hey, we will wash our hands of all of this. Everybody is happy. We will move on, but you're not dictating this thing because the NCAA has been beaten up so badly over the last 3 years. I have no faith in them. I've made that abundantly clear every time I get into anything involving the NCAA. But I think there are still things within their control that they can try to make statements as they are on their way out. This could be one of them where they say, nope, we want 1 through 4 or nothing at all.
The little bit of space that the NCAA still has power, I think they might feel that they can overwield it because of all of
petty
the
power.
losses.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's pettiness, petty power right now.
And so, yeah, I definitely would expect, at least for me, I'm expecting that Michigan is with an interim head coach for the first 4 games of the season, not just getting to pick and choose games 3 and 4. Nebraska, of course, will get to go through a non-conference slate before getting to that Michigan game, which, of course, begins in Kansas City, August 28th, Arrowhead Stadium, taking on Cincinnati. And I don't know if you've looked at, Nick, if you've looked at that weekend yet, but the next night for the Royals is Nebraska night at the ballpark.
Yeah.
To where I don't know if it's just a hat or if it's a jacket or something, but there's always incredible gear when the Royals have their Nebraska night there. So I think they're trying to take advantage of Husker fans being in KC and making a couple days out of it.
Yes, you spend Thursday and Friday with us out in Kansas City before you enjoy your Labor Day weekend plans. And by the way, I would assume, and I think you've talked about this before, I'm sure, that you would probably have at least one special visitor watching that game Thursday night, if not 2. And I think that would be one, Travis Kelce, because, of course, he's from Cincinnati. Patrick Mahomes, well, his little cuzzo is playing quarterback for Nebraska. And, hey, we all know wherever Travis Kelce goes, there's always a chance to have Taylor Swift. So who knows? It could be a Swifty Thursday for the season opener for Nebraska as well.
Do you have any idea how mad my wife will be, not would be, will be, if I am in Kansas City covering a Husker football game and all of a sudden, hey, so Taylor Swift just walked by. Like, do you want me to try to get a pic? Like, she will put our daughter in the car right then and there. She'll be like, I'll be down there.
Right.
Give me the 5 hours it takes to get down there. We're busting through traffic.
and seriously, unless there is something catastrophic, and I'm not even a Chiefs fan, but I don't wish that upon anybody. As far as Travis Kelce physically being unable to attend that game, he'll be there. Because
absolutely,
that's going to be right after camp, right before the season opener in Kansas City, hits his alma mater. And then, of course, his boy, his sidekick, or maybe he's Mahomes' sidekick, either way, has got his lookalike playing quarterback. And there's a relationship there, too, because those guys have worked out together several times, Dylan and Patrick Mahomes. Those guys are going to be at the game. The only question is, who's Taylor Swift? What does her tour dates look like? See, I'm not that big of a Swiftie that I could tell you exactly what the tour looks like when it comes to the end of August, but I would say there's a possibility. They already have the private route for her to get from the tunnel up to the suite anyway. So I mean, they've got that down. They might as well start working out the 2025 version of that at the Husker Cincinnati game.
That's going to be fun. Hey, if you missed anything on the show, you can go to Husker Mac's YouTube page. Make sure you like and subscribe, everything there, so you never miss a live show. Go to huskermax.com for everything you need Huskers. We will plan on being back on Thursday. We'll see if my computer decides to die again. Between now and then, though, Creighton game. Nick, just real quick, your expectations for the final non-con game of the season for Husker baseball tomorrow night.
I think this is going to be the most emotion we've seen from Nebraska and I don't want to say they don't show that emotion, but I think they always try to go into every game even keel as far as we want to win every game. And that's true. I think if you're a Division I, hell, if you're a college competitor, that's the case every day. This one, I think, is going to have a little bit of emotion, trash talking, the way Nebraska, remember Luke Broderick, one of the Creighton players who struck out at the end, was kind of complaining about that third strike, and Luke Broderick gestured and then stomped on it. And so there's been a lot of trash talking going back and forth. Will McLean, when he hit a home run against Nebraska in downtown Omaha, he pimped it a bit, and Nebraska didn't love that as well. And again, this is the final game with Nebraska versus Creighton, with Ed Service as the head coach for Creighton after 22 really solid years for a guy that I know that they respect, but I also know the competitiveness of Ed Service. He wants to go out in this series a winner as well. So I think both teams are going to be chomping at the bit. I think Nebraska, especially being at Haymarket Park and losing that first game to Creighton in their ballpark, I think they are going to be hungry tomorrow night for sure.
6 o'clock first pitch, or if you look that deeply into it, it's like 6:02. Yeah, but so Haymarket Park, make sure you get out there. Last non-con game of the regular season for the Huskers. This is their last home stand they're in the middle of, home this weekend, and then on the road the next weekend to close things out. Nick, thanks for putting up with my connection and my computer issues here. For the rest of you, we'll plan to talk on Thursday. And between now and then, and always, of course, go Big Red.